I would like to thank the UN Security Council Subcommittee on the Arts and Public Safety for inviting me here and asking me to speak on the topic of I fell into a ring of fire. I think I left my speech too close to the hearth, though. At any rate, what we were talking about for real, now that I assume that all the strays and serious people have left the viewing area. You recall we were talking last time that we're trying to give some detail regarding the energetic background to that particular city, secondary, literal, physical, material manifestation known in some circles as a legal theory having to do with the fact that you cannot slander the dead. And we were noting how, if you recall, that life uses that, the background of this, in the sense of letting people recall the past, recall past people, activities, with absolute impunity to be able to recall them in any way necessary to help continue life's continuity. But since all of you are now big boys and big girls and big brains, now let's try it another way. For those of you that are very interested in matters judicial, and not just those of you, of course, facing hard time. You should thank God that it's so easy to get bail now while appeals are pending. In case you're interested, here we go somewhere else with this, though. Maybe some of you like to take note if I have to do it for you. Maybe some of you are getting so far along that you cannot see the crude, the obvious, the contradictory. Is in one sense, we're about to just absolutely change the whole story. Which, of course, if this was some sort of, what do they call that? No, some sort of systematic presentation of something, this would be the end of it. It would suddenly be that the Pope bent over to bless you and farted, or somebody rushed up with a kid in their arm to the world's head, well, to the Pope again. I started to say world's head rabbi, but that wouldn't fly as well. Rush up with a little kid, and the kid goes, "Papa." See, so if this was a systematic presentation of some kind, this would be the point where those who had not already been around the room, faced with the possibility they were about to hear some sort of speech sanctioned by the UN or any other governmental agency. If that didn't do it, then this should, wait a minute. As soon as I start this, wait a minute. Not only does that not fit what we were talking about last time, which made a little sense to me. It was surprising, but I thought about it, and it made a little sense. But not only does now, 48 hours later, it not fit, as sharp as I am, my brain tells me this is almost the opposite. I shouldn't be crude like that. Well, come to think about it, if we were at the UN, there is some precedent for that sort of civilized behavior. All right, back to these kind of legal theories. For those of you who are interested, we'll start off again with something that actually happens out there in life, this kind of 3D reflection of something else. And that is that life has provided, well, apparently the city provides it. There is one absolute inescapable defense to slander. And of course, slander being in the 3D sense, to remind everyone, is that you say something untrue about someone alive. It is slanderous. And in all parts of the civilized world, there is a legal remedy available for speaking to harming someone. And of course, as we were pointing out, it also, for reasons that I wasn't going to allegorically go into, that I could still point out, but you can think about yourself, that once somebody dies, you can't slander them. Their reputation dies with them. After that, with absolute immunity, you can say anything you want to about anybody. In the law and all the parts of the world that does have slander remedies, they do not recognize it. That once a person's dead, you can do anything you want to. Their reputation does not survive, not legally. But now, there is an absolute defense to this charge, to this civil, this tort of slander. And it's quite simple. The truth. which shouldn't come as that big a surprise. In that case, in other words, if you picked out some public figure or just your neighbor, and you slander them, that is, you say something that would appear on the surface to give them a cause of legal action, and you say it to a third party. You say it to where it becomes knowledge to at least another person, and you describe horrible sex practices they do. You just talk about them as though their mama was a dog. And so, just on the surface, if you heard this, you'd say, now there is a legitimate cause of action for slander, except for this. If they get it into court, which is not hard to do, the defense that is absolute, is all you've got to do is take this horrible thing that you might have read the complaint or somebody said, here is what person A said about person B, and you read it, and it is just despicable. Ugh! All they got to do is come up and prove that it's true, and there is no slander. It's that simple. So now consider what life has done backstage, inside of more dimensions. Behind the fact, this legal theory that the perfect absolute defense to slander is the truth, consider it this way, that man's collective memory, remember where we started, that memory is like helping the continuity of life by being able to deal with the past in any way it wants to. That is, absolutely engage in slander, reconstruction of memory, that sort of thing, to help the continuity of life continue. The collective memory, forget all this stuff about collective unconsciousness and all that. I'll give you one that's worthwhile. Collective memory. Because man's got that. The idea of a collective unconscious or a collective ability to predict the future. I must repeat that other great speaker who preceded me here at the podium in the UN, that is, but there is a collective memory. And here's what it does. The collective memory about anyone, about anything, is the perfect defense that life provides man, because it allows everyone to slander the past, because collectively the memory, the slanderous memory, collectively is the truth. Come on, that's not that hard, is it? Yeah, it is, I guess. No, it's not. In the 3D sense, if we take X number of people anywhere, if it could be the whole planet, it doesn't matter, the number doesn't matter, but collectively, a group of people remember a man who just died, the mayor who just died, a pope, your neighbor. A group of people remember this person. Collectively, their memory, no matter how slanderous, that is, no matter from any individual view, that if you walked up to one of the individuals of this group and you said, tell me about Mayor so-and-so, or tell me about Dr. so-and-so, or the guy that lived next door, and they began to repeat slanderous remarks. Let's assume that they were not true, that the mayor cheated this guy one time, if we knew all the story and all that kind of thing. And so now he is slandering him, even though it's the truth. Let's say somebody next door tells even a worse story, and it's not the truth. And so over here says, the man was a saint. And they tell you stories about how he anonymously gave to charitable causes. If you took the collective memory of everyone who had any interest, that life drove to have any interest in this past event, this past person, if you put together all of the individual, and let's say that they're all to some degree slanderous, all right? Because who knows the absolute truth about anybody at the 3D level, etc. So we could say that individually, everyone's memory of everything is at least partially slanderous. But the collective memory of everything and anything would be three-dimensionally the truth, because it would represent every possible view. The man was an idiot. Next, the man was brilliant in his own way. The man was crafty. The man was heartless. The man gave. That's probably what killed him. He gave so much back to people. The man was the finest family. I could not have asked for a greater in-law. And over here somebody says, the man used to try to pick up anything that moved. All right, you take all of that, and what have you got? And don't say you're a typical politician or a lawyer. No. If you took the collective memory, no matter how individually slanderous, no matter how individually biased, prejudicial, collectively, you would have, from the three-dimensional view, the truth. It's not philosophical. I know it is irrelevant in the ordinary world, but it is not something to consider as a theory. You just got to see that three-dimensionally, there are certain spatial and intellectual limits to all dimensions. And three-dimensionally, take any person, or it can be an event, and of course the only events that interest people are events that had people in them. Nobody gives a damn, about a volcanic eruption that produces a new island up there in the middle of the Arctic that does not kill somebody. I mean, it might make the news, but it's come and gone. But if it comes up and it hits a cruise ship wherein some of the major stockholders of that particular TV network were on, that sort of thing. It's like Titanic goes down, John Jacob Astor killed, and below that it says, plus 750 others. In case you think you're a big deal. All right. So it doesn't matter what the event was. It doesn't matter what the person was. You surely hear me, and it's not theoretical. It is that if you took every possible view of the person, anybody that had any view, and it doesn't matter what, whether they knew him, or you ask somebody, did you actually know this guy? No, but I read about him. You can say, well, that doesn't count. Sure it counts. Because they can say, yeah, I read enough. I'm glad he's dead. I used to read about, I hated people like that. Taking them all, and surely you hear me, that then becomes the truth. That cannot be slanderous. The collective memory of the deceased, whether it's a deceased person, deceased idea, deceased theory, deceased event. As long as it's in the past, remember you can't slander it. But also, life saves man from slandering, because I already got your degree last week, those of you that were awake, that by dealing in the slander of the past, it hadn't hurt you. In all these years you thought, that either you're going to suffer some great subconscious trauma from lying, or else hair was going to grow out of your palm, I guess according to whether you're a man or a woman. That lying to yourself, always trying to make yourself look good, everybody else says is in some way harmful. And I asked you point blank last week, being the kind doctor I am, metaphorically speaking, don't send me any patients. I asked you, has it harmed you? And the answer was a resounding, no. So life, but even at the intellectual level, life has eased man. It produces no feeling that you have slandered people. I mean, individually it might. I know that you lie about somebody, you do something, and then somebody says, especially if that same person, and they got a bigger gun than you, show up and say, did I hear you said so-and-so about me? You go, me? No, I didn't say that. But collectively, taken as a whole, humanity does not feel guilty about slandering the past. They do not suffer over it. Contraire. They thrive on it, and life, of course, contraire, the big deal. Life is one that thrives over it with the continuity. But notice, one way to look at the way that you are let off the hook, that's not the point, but I'm trying to get you to look somewhere, is the perfect defense for this slander that everyone's memory commits on the past. Everybody, it has to. You got no choice. Your memory slanders the dead. And by dead, I mean literally and metaphorically anything that just went by. Anything that three-dimensionally is behind you in the temporal sense is the deceased. You have no choice but to slander it. But there's a perfect defense. The truth. Yes, but I individually, what I said was not the truth. I know all that. But collectively, everyone's slanderous memory of the past, the deceased, produces three-dimensionally the truth. What could be more fair? What could be more, for those of you in Oregon, equitable? Ordinary individual intelligence, of course, has no awareness of this. It serves no purpose. But consider this from an individual, subversive position. Think what you can do with this. that can be literally used as well as a hammer can. That an individual revolutionist can take humanity's collective memory, that is, what I've just described, of being able, you individually, to take in every possible view of some past situation or person. For you to be able to take individually that position, that is, the collective memory, the collective slanderous memory of anything that's gone. And by you being able to so do it, you can, in a sense, deconstruct the past and its effect on you. Because all you're doing, if you can hear it, you can do it. Or you can begin running at it, and it can't get away. You are simply doing that which humanity collectively does without knowing it. That you've got a handful of people at any time, take handful in any number, and what they remember, that individually all of their memories are prejudicial, slanted, biased, slanderous to some degree, but collectively this group of people, whether it be X or X to the 10 power, their slanderous memory of the past, thing, person, event, their collective memory is the truth. I mean, there's nowhere else to look. The more conflicting might appear to be the memories, the more you should be assured, well, by God, that's the truth. Except what you've got, if we had X to the 10 power, then you've got that many views of the past, let's say a person. That is the truth of that person. So what sounds individually to be slanderous and biased, taken in toto, the collective memory of all those who have a memory, who have an opinion, who will speak on the dead, their collective memory, no matter how individually slanderous, is then immune, is the perfect defense, because collectively it is the truth. Individually, can you hear it? To be able to take that is already happening at the general level of humanity, and you individually, a person, doesn't matter who, a relative, anything that's in your past, anything that you remember, and if you remember it more than a few times, then it is playing some part in the structure of your neural system. For you to be able to purposefully take every possible position about that person, you have, in a sense, deconstructed whatever the neural effect of the past was. Whatever line of continuity had you have some particular memory of that thing or that person. And it simply disassembles it. Whatever the effect was is no more. It can't be. Because there is no then one view. There is no slanderous view. And by slanderous view, by the way, at least any of you are really taking it serious now, it can be that if I said, if I asked an ordinary person, what is your memory of person so-and-so, your uncle, or somebody you knew? And their view could be, I love the man, he was indeed. I know people say it, but he was indeed a saint. I miss him, he was the closest person in the world to me. That is slanderous. At least you missed the point. Because it's not the truth. Because I assure you, you know this. You would admit it, even an ordinary person. I could say, wait a minute, does everybody who knew him say that? The person would look at me like I was an idiot. An ordinary person, well, certainly not. And I could say, well, if I may be so forward, I was speaking to someone down the street that said they did business with him, and they spoke about him, like he was one of Frank and James's long-lost brothers. They said the man couldn't be trusted. Yeah, I know that. And the ordinary intelligence would say, are you surprised by that? No one person has the same effect on everybody. But of course, what they're saying is wrong. I assume you don't believe it, or if you do, I'm here to tell you it's not true, because the man was a saint. You know, at least theoretically, that not everyone who knows anyone, not anyone who creates memory in more than one person, creates the same memory. You know that's not possible. But don't get hung up on the point about, well, yeah, but some of the memories are wrong. I love the person. It was my mother. It was my father. I know what sort of person they were. Now, I know that some of the more distant relatives had imaginary entanglements with him or her. And I know some people badmouth some of his business practices, but they don't know him like I did. In other words, my slanderous view is correct. But except ordinary people wouldn't say it was slanderous. They say, no, mine's correct. The rest of them are slanderous. Unless it is a complete, absolutely accepted by everyone who has any interest, opinion, or view, then it's slanderous. That is, it is less than the truth. That if you say, I knew them, they were as close to me, and I'm telling you that they never stole, they never cheated, they never parted their hair on the wrong side. You know that everybody who knew that person, even if they knew him second-handedly, that there is no one person, there's no one event, there's no one anything in the three-dimensional world on which everyone had the same opinion, the same memory, the same view. And so therefore, you got to follow this. Not in the city, not legally, of course, but everyone's view, even if it apparently is positive, is still slanderous because it is not the truth. Even though ordinary people say, well, it is the truth. He was a great guy. It's not the truth. It was the truth from that view, that slanderous view. But unless everyone stood and agreed unconditionally that yes, this person was, and it could be positive, yes, this guy was a living saint, then it's slanderous. Because even if you said, and even if, as they say in the city, you were telling the truth that the man was a saint, it's still slanderous. Because it is not a complete three-dimensional retelling, recounting description of what the person was. No one ordinary intelligence, no one ordinary view can absorb any other person, any other event. Not at the ordinary level. And so therefore, no matter, even if your view apparently was positive, it is still slanderous. So now note, the collective memory of everyone's view, which would be at least partially slanderous, even those that were positive, the collective view would be every possible view and would therefore be three-dimensionally. If I had some foolish reason to grab an ordinary intellect and hold them down and really arm wrestle them or throw them to the floor and then tickle them, I could momentarily even get an ordinary intelligence to say, yeah, you're right. That is, that the truth, whatever this nebulous thing has got to be, to ordinary minds, this has got to be a damn close approximation. If you had everyone's possible view about one person or one event, if you had every possible view, put them all together, in some way, that's got to be just about the truth. That you could not go back and cut open this pie and look at each little slice in each person's view, because each person's view is slightly different. But taken together, even if that doesn't tell you much, I'm still talking to an ordinary intelligence, and I'm tickling them, I got them held down. Now say, if you put them all together, you got to admit that just sort of philosophically, theoretically, that would have to represent the truth. We got problems? If you can do that individually, which is not, in that case, theoretical, it's not philosophical, it's to understand that this is the way things are already, why should I not take advantage of it? Life will never miss it. Life's not going to notice. Of course, you'll notice. Now say your old ordinary intelligence will notice, because it's going to feel like a train ran off of a track. A highway was going here right along, and suddenly it seemed to be closed. I seemed to be floating, not in a ditch. I seemed to be floating somewhere off the highway. I seemed to have been sailing along, and by God, some of Columbus's critics may have been correct. I seemed to, before I knew it, I went right off the edge. It's just I've yet to drop. Of course, you go off the edge, you don't know whether you're going to drop or not. But you'll have to check, since Columbus did not take along a Planck or an Einstein, about are you actually falling or not? Dropping. If you can simultaneously remember all aspects, remember all facets of any past person or event, you have, neurally, you have disarmed a particular continuity bomb in your own little federal courthouse. Or wherever the most fashionable place is now to leave a bomb. I don't know. But you have disarmed it. Not theoretically, not through some form of, what do they call it in the city? It starts with an R. Rye bread. Nope. Rationalization. It's not that in some way you say, well, I know I feel like that my uncle really took advantage of me that time that he got me to sign over my little savings account, and he said he would look after my best interest, and he took it and went off to a topless place and spent it all one night. It's not trying to say, well, now that I think back, now that I'm older and I look back, we should live and let live, especially since he's dead. I should be more magnanimous if I knew what that meant. I should be more forgiving, more tolerant. He wasn't such a bad guy. It's none of that crap. That kind of crap belongs in the more professional strata of professional crap like psychology and psychiatry, religion, serious beer drinking. It is not a rationalization, it is an understanding. You simply see that collectively humanity has a memory. It's not some kind of speculation, it's not metaphysical, it's not subconscious, it's not conscious, it's not psychological. It is part of the continuity of life living through man, that there is a collective memory of everything that's remembered. Now, you don't remember everything because everything that happened did not interest you. But everything that interests you at all, people you know who died that you still think about, events that happened to you that you still remember. And if you're ordinary, you would say, well, not only do I remember them, they still have some impact on my life. Whatever it was that happened, you do not remember it alone. There is no such thing as a solitary memory, because if it was solitary, you wouldn't remember it. It would have happened to you individually, and you would not remember it. You would have to be sans an intellectual partner. You would have no intellect running off the polarized energy that makes people have the ability to talk to themselves. I'm sorry for you who don't know who to think. So there is no such thing as a solitary memory. You do not remember something that there is not a collective memory of. So the collective memory is there. All memory in the ordinary intellect of all people is in some form collective. Now, I don't want to put figures, but it may be something you remember. It may not be that 1 million people remember it, because 1 million people may not have ever been aware of this particular thing that happened. But there is more than you who remember it, or else you would not remember it. And as long as you've got more than one person, you have a collective memory. And of course, at a wider level, surely some of you see this, at a wider level, what I'm talking about now about these sorts of things that perhaps you had an uncle that died and not that many people knew him. And so we'd say there is no worldwide memory of that man because the world did not even know him. All you got to do is just move up even within 3 dimensions, if you can begin to think a little bit. Even that is irrelevant because in a sense the memory of your recluse Uncle Elmer that not many people knew, in a sense he is absorbed by a greater memory of everything else. And so he is part of everyone's collective memory. He is slandered as well as anyone else. And of course, the part of continuity, if you've already forgotten, people who didn't know him can slander him. Because you can say, I'm trying to investigate a thing about collective memory, and I had an uncle who lived over in such and such. Did you know him? No, I didn't. His name was Elmer so-and-so. No, I never heard of him. Well, I'm not surprised because he lived mostly by himself and never got married, didn't have any children, and he stayed at home a lot. The person you're talking to now can begin to have a memory of him because they can say, was he some kind of hermit? He sounded like he was weird to me. No wonder nobody remembers him. He didn't leave town. Who's going to remember? Why are you asking me? I don't even like people who come around asking questions. So now he never heard of Uncle Elmer, and now he has some memory of him, and he never saw him. It helps the continuity continue because now he has a memory of things that from the 3D view, he's got none to remember. He's got no basis for the memory. That doesn't matter. You can say, let me tell you what happened. Have you ever heard about this event? No, I hadn't. Well, let me tell you because I don't know what you think. Was that too obscure? No. Because to bring it up to date, how about modern on-the-spot news reporting? The classic example, I say classic. Yeah. They report, worker falls off the 17th story of a building in Manhattan, 117th. And we have our eyewitness news reporter there on the scene. And suddenly they flash there and it says live on the screen. Here's this guy or girl running around. And they find some guy just standing there looking kind of dazed. And I rush up to him and says, do you work here? And the guy says, yeah. You got on a hard hat and all. I said, yeah. Were you here when it happened? Yeah. Well, tell us, what did you think when you looked up? How did you feel when you saw the person fall? And he says, as a matter of fact, I was in the bathroom over there in the little thing, so I didn't actually see it. And so there they stand there live. And so they say, well, tell us, if you had seen it, how would you have felt? that is not just a joke, because that is a part of what I was trying to describe, that you can have a memory. You can start asking somebody, how do you feel about my Uncle Elmer? I don't even know who the hell you're talking about. And you tell them a little bit about the person, and then you can say, well, all right, now have I told you enough? Can you form an opinion? If you had known him, based on what I told you, how would you have felt? And they go, no, I don't think I would have liked the man. Or conversely, from what you told me, I didn't meet him, but I'm taking your word, the man would have had to have been a saint. I'm sorry as hell I didn't get to meet a man like that. You understand? It's the continuity. And this has nothing to do with the ordinary level, as ordinary intelligence would say, that, well, wait a minute, this is not the truth. See, they missed it. It now becomes part of the truth. It becomes part of the collective memory. It is part of the collective reality. Or put another way, if any of you are having any trouble with me keeping with memory because it had to do with the continuity, is that good old little story, that little Kairoot, that the world is big enough for everybody. No, it is. And that was just the first way you put it. Because it's not that, well, hooray for the world. What a decent world. The size of the world. Now you got to get away from the literal. You even got to get past the metaphorical into the symbolic. That the world is not big enough for everybody. Everybody and the size of the world is the same thing. So contemporaneously, whatever is thought right now, not just memory, but if right now the whole world, if we had one of those real shitty kinds of PA systems they used to have in drive-in theaters or at Kmart, and we had this one big speaker that right now on planet Earth we could holler, attention, hold it. And everybody held it. And the voice said, what do you think of Nouveau California cuisine? What do you think of the New York Daily News? What do you think of Wagner? Whatever you ask, now let's say it's not the memory anymore. Or what do you think of our president's current foreign policy toward Albania? There's something going on right now. It's the same thing. The collective, instead of calling it memory now, let's say if the whole world then heard this, and everybody in some way that their neurally could register what their response to the question. What do you think of our president's economic policy as enunciated in today's speech? And everybody's neural system in some way could like mash a button and register what they thought. You follow me? The whole world. It's the same thing. It would then be collective memory. We call it collective awareness. And somebody over here slanders. Somebody over here says their opinion of what he said. And from certain views, you can say, wait a minute, that person, they didn't even hear him correctly. Which could be. I was busy and I heard it. I was shaving, got stuff in my ear. And so they could hear it wrong. And somebody over here says, well, all right, here's what I believe. Here's what he said. We take all of that and put it together. Individually, you could say that continually they were slanderous. That is incorrect. Somebody didn't even hear it. And if you say, I don't think you heard him good, they may admit, well, I wasn't listening good. But still, everybody had to register some response to the question. You got me? Forget individually that, wait a minute, we got people here responding who didn't even hear it good. So, put them all together and what you got. The city would not find any use for this. But you've got what they laughingly call, and keep saying they're chasing, the truth. So the world is big enough for everything. The world is big enough for all memories. No matter how slanderous, no matter how imperfect, no matter how prejudicial. They got to be. Because if it were not for that being big enough for the collective memory, it would not serve the purpose of continuity. Because you would have fragmented memories. In the polarization, you would remember one thing as being completely vanilla or chocolate. Vanilla, completely up, completely down, completely good, completely bad. It would be so unweighted that it would not be part of the continuity. If it was weighted too much, by the way, which is always another story, it would not be remembered. If something did happen, and a large number of people went, and it happened, and they went, ugh, that everybody who observed it had one particular feeling, or they all went, it wouldn't be remembered. For those of you who used to think you were interested in affairs metaphysical. If things did at a three-dimensional level, if the arm came down the fishbowl and did weird things like send down people from other dimensions in little flying cups and shoeboxes, or if these great creatures from somewhere else came down and visited man, if they did, whatever group they visited, may I suggest to you, and I'm not trying to give you any kind of hint, I'm just going back to the kinds of seepage that life lets drip from the floor upstairs because of all those people dancing sometimes. And it comes down here, and people, have dreamed for years that this is going on or should go on. If it had gone on, then whatever group was confronted by these appearances from higher dimensions, it would have gotten close to a certainty. It would have gotten very close, may I suggest, to a point to where there were no individual views of what happened. Everybody's view would have been the same. And whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to imagine, everybody was just scared to a point that was not good for their Fruit of the Looms. or that everybody was just delighted. But it would be such that after it was over, there would be no memory of it. Now, they could have remembered it, but there'd be no collective memory, and therefore if they tried to tell anybody, nobody else would remember it. In other words, it would not be part of the collective memory. In other words, it would not be part of history. Thus, you can count on the fact that all these other things that are part of history, these astounding things like, well, a guy showed up and there was no doubt he was God's son. He was God's brother-in-law. No matter how standing. Listen, my uncle was visited by some people from another universe. And my uncle, I know the man is a saint. I know it sounds weird, but I believe him. If it's part of history at all, you can forget it. Because it was not astounding. If it was astounding, I'm suggesting, maybe we'll get into it another way, it would be unpolarized. There would not be a collection of views. Everybody's view would be the same. The effect it would have on everybody there would be the same. And so there would be no collective memory possible. Because you're not being fueled by polarized energy. And so even though they could remember it individually, when they tried to tell anybody, everybody else would just ignore it. But they'd listen and go, and literally, they would forget it. It's not they'd go in thinking, that's a strange story. I mean, at first I didn't believe it, but I'm going to have to think about that. They'd hear it and just walk off. It was like, you heard a noise outside and you just forgot about it. You can't remember the number of times you heard a noise at your house, or somebody came up later and say, did some people tell you about something astounding that happened one time? You might think, well, surely they'd remember it. What if somebody came up and says, do you ever hear noises outside your house late at night? Maybe you get to go to the bathroom with your glass of water and you hear a creak or something. People go, well, yeah. You say, can you remember, it was in April, it was the 17th, April 17th, it was 1973. Do you remember the noise that night? And the person, what if somebody said, well, I know for a fact that you did hear a noise because you got up. You even got up and looked out the window. And you go, well, I don't know. Yeah, so can't you remember? You go, no, I can't remember. It's like that. That if somebody who had gone through something that was a non-polarized, the fuel behind it was non-polarized. That is, it was not, there could be no possible individual reaction to it. Therefore, there could be no collective slanderous memory of it. Their memory of it, when they tried to tell it, would just be a noise in the night. I just wanted to point out that if anything astounding has ever happened at this dimension or any other dimension, but if something astounding had happened here, something from other dimensions came through, nobody remembers it. I'm just going to point out to you. And conversely, the stuff they do remember, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but you're dealing with King Arthur's court and all that stuff, just redressed and redressed and redressed. Because as long as there is any dispute, well, wait a minute, that guy could have been astounding, but he sure as hell wasn't God's brother-in-law. There's your proof. Of course, ordinary intelligence will say, well, that's no proof at all because we have got people who do not believe correctly. That is, in other words, if somebody said, wait, there has been astounding things, I'll take an obvious, we'll get back on the path in a minute, but some of you ought to be able to see something from this. Let's take an easy example. Christians say Jesus was actually from another world. I mean, he's actually the son of the Creator. He's son of God, or whatever they call it. And somebody says, wait a minute, that's not true. How can you say that? And the person says, well, for one thing, I'm a Muslim, and I don't believe that. He may have been a fine fellow, I've read some of it, and he spoke poetically, if they got his words correctly. All right, and I could say, all right, there's proof. In ordinary intelligence, say, wait a minute, that's not proof. And let's say that I'm speaking to a Christian, an intelligent, ordinary Christian. And I say, well, there's proof that it wasn't extraordinary because there is some conflict. We got other views. And the Christian intellect would say, well, you're an idiot. Because the conflicting view is the person is not a Christian. Maybe I confused it more. Let's say that they're an atheist. They're a heathen. And they say, well, the person is not religious, and so their view is incorrect. Do you see? It doesn't matter that the view is incorrect from anybody's view. As long as there is a conflicting view, it's not extraordinary. As long as there's a conflicting view, it's just affairs as general, as expected. Something else that ran by you tonight through the car routes point out that not only, Kyroot was sort of quoting himself from a few nights ago, not only are there two ways of looking at everything, there's also one. Can you see, connected to what we're just talking about, that this would be a kind of, well, not a kind of, I keep hedging around trying to ease up on people, like that your sensibilities deserve some sort of consideration. Well, of course, if you think so, you deserve it. It's like trying to protect your brain. Well, wait a minute, I don't mind listening to some of this, but by the way, I am a Muslim, and I'd appreciate it if you don't use those examples. By the way, I am Catholic. By the way, I am human. So it's not kind of, I was going to say, from a revolutionist, from a more advanced side. There is one way of looking, in addition to being two ways. And the one way of being able to look from a more subversive position is the one view is to see how everything is arranged to accommodate the future. We're going to make this one quick. Maybe I should have left with Kyroot. See, I'll go ahead and spell it out right quick for a little sensibilities. A few weeks back, Kyroot was one of them that Kyroot says there are two ways of looking at everything. Now, it would be if we were in some way engaged in some kind of citywide or city philosophical commentary of some kind, it'd be easier to say there's got to be two ways of looking at everything. Of course, that would not be original with me or Kyroot. Two sides to every argument. You cannot say, some sophisticated, non-religious, nailed person today might say, you cannot take sides in arguments between Christians and Jews or Jews and Muslims because neither one of them have a monkey grip on the truth. No one has a lock on the truth. So there are two sides to every argument. All right. So I could say some night, well, there are two ways of looking at everything. And if it was ordinary people, they'd go, my, how weighty. At least those who are really sharp would think that I was an up-to-date or with it plagiarist. But then if I said next week, or I could say, come back and we'll get into more advanced studies along these lines, then would it not be expected to say, all right, not only are there two ways of looking at everything, there are also three ways of looking at everything. And some of you have been right here long enough, you can start making up your own version of that right quick. I don't even have to go. And then we could do that, and I could say, well, come back next month. And I could say, not only are there three ways of looking at everything. So, see, there was supposed to be a bit of a surprise to say, not only are there two ways of looking at everything, there's also one. Because this, let me play the part of ordinary intelligence again, could also be not only a surprise, but somewhat of a disappointment, another excuse that I'm going to leave this. Because, wait a minute, just what you're talking about is a kind of collective view. You was even saying, if I heard you correctly, that you were saying that a person could take the reality of the collective memory, this individually slanderous, partial, flawed memory of each individual, and then collectively it being, as you called it, the collective memory being the truth about whatever happened in the past, whatever, we're talking about a person or an action, then you're saying, if I heard you correctly, that one person could use this so that you would try and have every possible view, take into every possible consideration of what was about some person or some event, and you would have some kind of new view. Didn't you say that? And I go, uh-huh. They can say, wait a minute. That's for those of you taking notes. They can say, wait a minute. What you're saying now is just the opposite of that. Now you're saying that there's one view. Now you're saying that there is possible that somebody could have one view and say, wait a minute. Don't give me all that crap about the man was a saint or the man was not a saint or he was half a saint or somebody over here saying, we didn't know him as well as I did. Hey, forget all that. I can tell you for certain there's one view and here it is. Because that would be, I'll still speak for ordinary intelligence. Of course, I'm giving them credit. ordinary intelligence could say, wait a minute, not only is that in opposition to what you said, which was almost making a little sense, but you are now stepping into caramba, those kinds of piles of fanaticism. Now you're saying that, if I'm hearing you, you're now saying that there is one proper view to see everything. Yeah, except they wouldn't hear what I said. This one proper view is being able to see that everything is arranged, including collective memory. See, everything means, I picked out that word purposely, I got to admit. I wrote it down, everything. Go look it up. Everything is arranged to accommodate the future. Everything, did you say everything? Does that include people? People. Ideas? Yeah, ideas. Ships that sank? Yes. Ships that didn't sink? Yeah, yes. Rich people? Yes. Poor people? Yes. Everything is arranged from this possible one view. Everything, including people's collective memory, people's faulty memory, somebody's good memory. Everything. Yeah, everything. That's what I meant to say. I wrote it. Everything. Everything is arranged to accommodate the future via continuity. It just makes it a little more interesting for those of you who like to take mathematical notes. You can start off at a city level and say, well, fanatics, people with very little neural activity in any meaningful sense, people like that are inclined to have one view. Most kind of people say, well, I tell you, everybody should be a Democrat or Republican, or the only true life worth living is to be Irish, or God, it's great to be whatever. Just one view. You can say, well, that is fanaticism. To call it that is being somewhat charitable, assuming the person doesn't have a large weapon. And then calling somebody a fanatic, of course, can be less than an innocuous affair. But let's assume that you just say, well, that's about the least you can say about somebody. They're narrow-minded. They're provincial, intellectually, artistically, socially, to such a degree that they're in a class by themselves. They're just, who wants to deal with somebody like that? Even at the ordinary level, they do not. It's a child. I mean, you're talking about literally a baby, intellectually, and of course, normally, in the middle class of life's body, that it would be limited to a baby. Is they're the ones who go, no, yes. Would you like some carrots? No. And then you try to discuss the great benefits of carotene or vitamin E and tell them why they need carrots. And say, are you listening? And they go, yes. All right. Do you see now some of the reasons why you should eat carrots? No. Well, no, wait, kid. I mean, do you see philosophically? I mean, even though, now you may not say you like carrots. In the whole world, everybody, that's why we have carrots and that's why we have peas. I eat peas too. You're in the story. That's why we have vanilla and that's why we have chocolate, kid. And the kid goes, all right. So you may not like carrots. I don't say that me trying to show you the benefits of why we need carrots. I'm not trying to say that's going to change your taste. But all I want you to see is, even though you may not like carrots, there are things I don't like. Kids figure, so what? You people keep trying to get me off the track. So you say to the kid, well, now, I'm not trying to change your taste, but I just want to ask you, do you now understand why, theoretically, why you should eat carrots? No! Now, surely all of you have either been around kids or else you've been around yourself and you have a fairly good memory. That is, even parents, I think they call it driving them up to Indianapolis. No, they don't. They call it driving them up the wall. That's it. Is they say, well, hey, look, you don't have to agree to me, but just listen, you hear what I'm saying. No! And so you go back and you try to reason. You say, all right, now you said you didn't like carrots. Yeah. And I said I understood that because of things I didn't like. Yeah. But I did point out to you that the only reason people, I don't like carrots. They're not my favorite food next, compared to Rocky Road, I would not. Carrots. But you do understand that sometimes we have to eat things that may not be our favorites, but because it's good for us. You followed that much? No! When you know damn well they had to. That would be an adult view, an old man view. So that would seem to be, quite properly, a description of the lowest form of intellectual activity on this planet, right? That one view, it's just helpless. It will drive you. So then you get a little bit better. And in life, many times, this is as good as anybody gets. In some whole groups, some whole states, some whole epochs of history, that's as good as they ever got, was, well, There may be two views. So you can say, well, now we're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere historically that man reaches the point, individual men do, humanity has, that we now have. We got Protestants and Catholics killing each other in Ireland, and Jews and Arabs and Palestine, the Mideast. And so you can say, well, wait a minute. At least some of them. We have over here a Muslim who stands up and says, well, I got to admit, we should not just out of hand, dogmatically, hate those of a different religion. So every now and then you have people around life's girdle, they go, well, there's some hope for humanity. Because at least we have a few people who are not absolute, blind-eyed, pie-faced fanatics. We have a few people who will say, well, there are two views. So you can think, life is progressing. Then you could get to the point that some of you, many of you, probably all of you, correctly have assumed or heard that we have talked about there are always three views. There's always the background. There's always the background noise of radiation in a polarized world. There is the background in which yin-yang is drawn. There is the E-pool of that which is not being involved with a particular dance going on between any two forces. So then you could say it's out of the ordinary already. It's of no consequence, no interest, and it cannot be part of the kind of permanent memory of collective humanity to get them to see that there are actually three views about everything. Not theoretically, there are three views, and you're getting then close to getting your hands on something. So, going through that, then ordinary intelligence, if they'd followed all this, and went, yeah. Then say, and now you're saying that past that, forget four views, all that there's one view. No. God, caught again. But the one view is that all the other views are within the arrangement. They are within the accommodation of the future. There would be no future without continuity, and there would be no continuity without the collective memory, without the people of one view, a person here and there of two views, whole groups of people that say sometimes two views, a few people here and that says three views. Without this arrangement, there would be no complete accommodation for the future. The highway would not be wide enough, and that is strictly metaphorical to call it wide. It is not encompassing enough for the future, for the continuity of what's going on now to move. That is why I let Kairouch say there are not only two views to everything, there are not only three views to everything, there's also one view. There was another one he ran by tonight. I don't know how many people liked it, because it doesn't matter. No offense, but I'm going to go ahead and use it. It's what I meant. And that was that the cowardly band together while the brave mostly live alone. I guess ordinary people would take that as being some kind of Machiavelli's brother-in-law revisited. But think about it this way. The ordinary thoughts of man, the ordinary, which of course is always in the river of continuity, that the ordinary thoughts of everybody, from the geniuses down to the cab drivers and politicians, that all of these thoughts are revisions, they're plagiarisms, they're slanders of previous thoughts, that all of these thoughts, without any effort, without any control, they all band together. They are cowardly in the sense that Kairouch meant, and they band together in ways that can be seen out here, which helps constitute what appears to be identifiable groups, but, sad to say, like some strange 1950 science fiction monster, these cowardly groups, they band together where? Inside of an individual. They've got no choice. That is the efficiency of life. It is, and I'm using cowardly, of course, trying to get your attention to make you look a certain way, because it is not a judicial statement about ordinary people's thinking. But it is that it's all, at the ordinary level, dependent upon, inescapable from the ordinary flow of neural continuity, and therefore, in a sense, it is cowardly, because you cannot think originally. You can only revise. You can only plagiarize. And so in that sense, you got to follow this really metaphorically. We'll admit that. That in that sense, these kinds of thoughts, this kind of thinking process, in a sense, is cowardly. At the ordinary level, it's got no choice, and it's not cowardly, but you understand what I'm saying. That if it had a choice, we would have to then say, what a bunch of cowards. Because no one is going to think, well, wait a minute. I understand now the continuity of thought extant in my day and time, even at the best possible mental level, and I see what it's doing. Screw the edge of the earth. I'm going to sail off anyway. Even if they could think that, they can't do it. What are they going to do? Sail off? And they think, wow, whew, thanks to my nerve, and of course a half-gallon of Jim Beam, I can now think anew. I can imagine what? Here we go. Flying pigs. Imagine Jesus smoking a joint. Imagine Buddha with bad body odor. All you can do is plagiarize. All you can do is revise. All you can do is draw from the collective memory, the slanderous memory of humanity. Not you, but from humanity, and try to put it back together. To put wings on pigs, to put wings on Jesus, to put Jesus on a pig. That's all you can do. And so in that sense, if they knew about it, and there was some possibility of ordinary intelligence doing otherwise, then you see why I metaphorically point out that those thoughts are cowardly, and they must band together. They've got no choice. That's what passes for ordinary sanity. But now consider the rest of that little Kairoot truism, that the cowardly band together and the brave live mostly alone. Then may I point out that if you looked at the brave then as being the ability to think anew, it does stand apart. It would not be part of the round up the wagon trains, Eleanor, because here come the Indians, we got to protect ourselves. Here comes the possibility of new thinking, which of course is not the way the ordinary intellect looks at it, but here comes insanity. Here comes the unknown. And it's not that they recognize it, because what are we describing? The future. And nobody knows what it is at the ordinary level. The only thing ordinary intellect knows is that which is part of the collective memory. And it's that says, well, I can predict the future. Sure. You can revise what's already happened. That's all people can do. If somebody can predict the future and knew what they were doing, they said it, nobody would hear it. I mean, they could hear the sound waves, but they wouldn't hear it, because it would not be polarized. It would not be part of the collective past, which is dead, and so it would be a non-revision. It would be non-plagiarized, and nobody could hear it. Is that it? That's it.